Welcome to the Lovecars on the Grid podcast, your global motorsport roundup with me, Tiffany Dell, and Paul Woodman.
Welcome to Lovecars on the Grid, where we look back on a week of motorsport from all over the world, including an incredible French MotoGP at Le Mans, a wonderful WEC race at Spa, Indycars, Sportscars, and of course, NASCAR from America. Supercar drama down under, and the BTCC boys were back entertaining us at home at Brands Hatch with a little help from the Caterham crowd, actually. Didn't go unnoticed.
Yes, no.
But first, I hate starting on this. We got to start on a real downer, but the horror show at last Monday it was bank holiday. We recorded on the Monday and missed this. But of course, just such a tragic event in the British Superbikes at Alton Park. And obviously, we want to send our sincere condolences to everybody involved because it's just an awful thing that nobody wants to see or hear.
I mean, Owen Jenner was just 21, a lovely lad doing what he dreamed of doing. And Shane Richardson, he was a Kiwi, come over and, he's been about 29 and he's been racing for a while. And I mean, we always look, I think, part of why motorbike racing is so popular, because it's still, you're seeing danger. You see a man, a human or a woman, on a motorbike. So you can actually see, in Formula One now, you can see the top of the little crash helmets. You don't see, whereas the old days when I went to Goodwood, you saw a human wrestling their steering wheels, and if he crashed, he got flung out of the car maybe. And so you knew there was danger there. And I think with motorbike racing, you have that always when you watch bikes. You're always thinking, you watch this, the Northwest 200 went off last weekend in Northern Ireland, and you just say, you hope the weekend ends like the TT, in the Isle of Man. You actually
without any fatalities, yeah.
You just hope you read at the end of the day the word to the fatalities. It happens so rarely in the circuit racing, incredibly rarely. I mean, it still happens, most years there's a fatality or two. But when the guys went down in that pack, the problem was that because they went through the first corner, normally if someone drops it at turn one, there's always a big pack. But then usually you'll slide outwards and the pack can come by on the inside. And the problem there was they'd sort of finished the corner. I think someone must have got pushed out slightly on the exit of Old Hall. And they were up the straight before he fell into the pack. And that was by then they'd sort of, fanned out to 5 wide going down. So it was a real freak.
Do you know what? I couldn't even watch it. It's just awful.
I never looked. No. Also, Tom Tunstall. I have to send our condolences. I hope Tom Tunstall, who's still in hospital with a spinal injury, is the third. Hope he gets better soon.
I dropped Stuart Higgs from BSV a line. But what do? You don't know whether to leave them. They're so inundated with everything going on, but obviously we feel for them. And also I want to mention as well, grassroots motorsport, just in an autosport event, a girl 13, Lauren O'Brien her name was, I think it was in Northern Ireland, it was in County Cork, and she died as well last Tuesday just gone. So it is thankfully it's not that often, but when it happens it really does hit home, and it just feels very odd to be going into fun and excitement, but our sincere condolences to them. But I do want to now turn and go to a slightly more entertaining, hopefully, definitely more entertaining point about a driver called Franz Herrmann. You ever heard of him?
No.
Well, this guy turned up at the Nurburgring in a Ferrari GT car and allegedly set a lap record. It was, of course, Max Verstappen.
Oh, that's right. I did hear that story. Isn't that lovely? He was doing something he loves, and he quietly wanted to do it quietly. But you can't do it quietly when you're Max Verstappen. Gone are the days when Jim Clark would turn up at Goodwood and do the Formula One race, the Sportscar race, and the touring car race. It's fantastic to see a driver that just he loves his online racing, doesn't he? And he's just a true petrol in many ways. So it's wonderful he went and had a go. It was just a test. I think it broke down as well. It came on the back of a flatbed. So,
it's a testament to how good sim racing is, because clearly you cannot turn up to the Nurburgring and set those sort of times or alleged times without being a Nurburgring specialist. But it just goes to show how good sims are, because he's obviously spent hours and hours and hours on the sim, and then turns up, and apparently, and this is according to that Misha guy who does all the fast laps around there, apparently he did 2 laps of 7:56, And the pole was set by a guy doing 7:51, so 2 laps of 7:56, and he did a lap at 7:48, and the lap record was 7:49 for a GT3 car. So, look, whatever you want to believe or speculate, and that was with the full tank, blah blah blah. But
Yeah,
he is
lovely.
some talent,
Yeah.
and the fact that he's doing it and having a laugh and enjoying it.
Yeah.
He does rallying as well. Not a lot of people know that. Him and Joss, I've mentioned
Well,
this
his dad,
a few times before.
And he got allowed to do that a week after his kid was born. I bet. Oh yes, darling. I'm home from the Miami Grand Prix. How's our little baby? I'm just going to the Nurburgring now. See you in a week's time.
I think Max will certainly make his own decisions out of what he wants to do and when he wants to do it. But good for him. I've become a Max fan. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a fan of how he drives.
Well, we've always said that. We like his
comment.
We've always said that. We like the way he approaches the way we like his honesty. We just don't sometimes like the way he races, but that's another debate. Of course, staying in Formula One, the big story last week with this Alpine. The Alpine saga that is growing. The biggest thing was that all we thought was that Doohan was going to get sacked and Colapinto was going to come in, which has happened. But in the background, I've sort of got the timeline of what happened, because this Oliver Oakes who resigned, but it was his brother William Oakes, which little did we know. So on the Thursday before the Miami weekend, William Oakes was arrested. That's now quite well known in the press near Silverstone with a car full of cash, is the quote.
Well, he's not full of cash. Is that a quote, is it?
There's I read some story, BBC, I think, I think they described it as a car full of cash.
Okay.
And then on the Saturday of Miami Grand Prix, he was taken to a magistrate's court. He'd been remanded in custody and accused of transferring criminal property. So that was we didn't know that was going on. Nobody sort of saw that story whilst the Miami Grand Prix was going on. But of course, on the Tuesday after the race, with the rumours of Doohan being sacked, but it hadn't yet happened, Oliver Oakes resigned his job as the chief of the Alpine Formula One team. So we all thought this was because Briatore, who's come in, he's so well known for slashing drivers, cutting them, doing what he wants. So we always assumed Oakes had quit ahead of the announcement of Doohan being dropped for Colapinto, which happened on the Wednesday. So little did we know that this whole high-tech team, because of course Oliver Oakes and his brother William were directors of the high-tech team that run Formula 2, Formula 3, GB3, Formula 1 Academy. They run a lot of single-seater motorsport, which is where Oliver had been working until he was headhunted by Alpine to do the Alpine squad. So apparently, and I don't know fully of this, but according to people that work in the industry, the cars have all been impounded at high-tech. We've got Formula 2 and Formula 3 turning up at Imola. So by this weekend, they should be at Imola. And of course, we've got Luke Browning, the British drivers driving with the Formula 2 team, doing really well. So it could have a lot of knock-on effects. But Oliver Oakes apparently went, again, I think, went straight to Dubai from Miami. So he hasn't been since. So an awful lot of don't know what's going on at high-tech, because the team, you see, why the whole controversy grows and grows. In 2022, it was 75% owned by Dmitry Mazepin, of course, Nikita's father. So it was 75% Russian-owned. And then the whole 2022 attacking on Russian oligarchs. So he gave his 75% to the Oakes brothers. So they now owned the share. They created a new company in 2022, having inherited the Mazepin shareholding. So obviously one's thinking Russia, and who knows? So
a couple of people said, there's no way, we've all got a PhD in hindsight, haven't we? But they said, there's no way he gave his amazing job up just because of his loyalty to one driver. He wasn't that loyal to Jack Doohan.
Flavio was quoted saying, look, there's nothing wrong between, me and Ollie. It seems that they were quite friendly. That's why then it became all weird. Well, why did he quit if he's friendly? So it would appear that he quit because of the high. Well,
Flavio had that massive controversy, 2014, was it, where he was caught cheating?
He was in charge of the crash. That was the Piquet crash. That was the Singapore Piquet, and he was banned for life originally. How he's managed to be unbanned, I don't know. Yeah, he was the creator of the Nelson Piquet Jr. deliberate crash that gave Alonso a win when Renault, of course, were in a terrible state. Briatore was in trouble because the team was rubbish. It gave Alonso a win. And also, more importantly for many, it deprived Felipe Massa of a world championship. So it wasn't just a knock-on
Poor old
effect,
Massa.
because the chaos caused by Piquet Jr.'s unexpected crash out of the blue, and then the sudden pit stops, and then a Ferrari cocked up in the pits, didn't they?
So is this what Massa's taking the FIA to court over? He's still not letting it go?
Yeah,
is this
he
the one,
says
or is it the Lewis Hamilton one?
He says that race should have been null and voided. I think that was part of Massa's case, because the race was affected hugely by this illegal, deliberate crash. I think they say that race should have been null and voided.
And famously, the Hamilton race at Abu Dhabi, it wouldn't have mattered if it was null and voided. That's why Mercedes dropped it, because Max had more wins than Lewis
before, yeah.
So it would have been irrelevant, hence why the Mercedes dropped it. Otherwise, of course, they would have won.
Mr. Briatore is full of... In fact, funny enough, I think Briatore was responsible for sacking Max's dad from Benetton. I'm pretty sure he was in charge. Yeah, I think he was...
He's some character. I'm not a massive fan, but
no.
Good. Alpine have had so many different bosses in the last goodness knows how long. So they got to get some stability there, and the cars aren't doing very well either.
They need the money, because they've now got Mercedes engines. I don't think they're getting as much money from Renault, because next year they've got Mercedes power plants. They're just more or less yet another team like Williams. And of course, Colapinto's got the money to bring in. And I'm not convinced Colapinto's to be any better than Doohan. They say Doohan, I think Colapinto's only been given 8 races, and then they're going to decide whether to put Doohan back in again or not. But I looked at that photo of, I feel so sorry for Jackson in Miami. Lawson just squeezed him in. I looked at the one. I know it's a still photo. I never take a still photo as proof of who's ahead. But Lawson at turn 1, the right hand, had plenty of room on his left, and Doohan was half up the inside. Whether his wing mirror was level, whether his front wheel was, I don't know what it is. Whether his front wheel was level, I don't know. But anyway, Lawson could have avoided that crash.
The old man's not very happy. Mick as well. He posted their results. Gasly's against Doohan's, and said, well, what's all this about? I don't think he said anything, actually. He just let the pictures do the results do the talking. Anyway, let's go.
Yeah, one other thing on that, just to finish off on poor John. Apparently that crash at Suzuka, apparently he'd taken turn 1 on the simulator with the DRS open. And nobody had told him, because they were saying afterwards, you can't do it on the real track. And he says, well, I wasn't told that. And that's another little thing. So that huge crash that ruined his Suzuka weekend was he just was doing what he'd done in the simulator, and it worked.
How can the sim be so wrong, though? How can it be so wrong?
Because pretty marginal, probably, but it swapped ends became a shock, didn't it? But let's leave the doom and gloom of Formula One and move on to MotoGP, which had the most magical weekend of motorsport at Le Mans. Not the wonderful 24-hour race track, of course, but the little tight Bugatti circuit. Because the story began with Fabio Quartararo, the former world champion on his Yamaha, getting pole position, which was pole you get it both for the sprint and the main Grand Prix. But in the sprint race, he led for a while, and the French crowd were cheering, and wonderful atmosphere before the Ducati massive attack overtook them. The Ducati gang, we might call it. And again, we had another Marquez 1-2 with Mark ahead of Alex, and it all seemed normal. Bagnaia fell, so he wasn't third even this time. His season's going from worse to worse. So Fermin Aldeguer, this Spanish kid that's much highly rated, who was Alex Marquez's teammate in the Gresini Ducatis, he came third. So it was all fairly normal. French, slightly disappointed, had a lead. But then for the Grand Prix, there he was again on pole position, Fabio Quartararo, the French superstar. And it was all threatening to rain, and then they did a sighting lap, and it started spitting with rain, and most of the field were on slicks already. And then we had this big telly, because then all the slick boys at the end of the second sighting lap, when they go back to the grid, they all peeled into the pits, because now they've realised they're on the wrong tyres. There were some at the back that had wets on who didn't go in. But because more than 10 bikes pitted, then it was red flagged. You remember the case? Where were they when Marc Marquez jumped off his bike and went into the pit lane? I think they had to rewrite the rules. So they all pitted ostensibly. What's that word? Ostensibly, close to that word, to change tyres to wets. But then while they were all in the pits, apparently the weather sort of changed. And so they didn't change their tyres. So they'd stopped the race. They'd caused a red flag, but not changed tyres. So then they were all given 2 long lap penalties. About 10 or 12 riders who did this because they then came back on the grid with slicks still on. So they had 2 long lap penalties for doing that because you can't go in and then not change the wets. It's like a bluff and a double bluff to buy a bit of time, I guess. They sort of wanted to go to the pits. So then the front 10 or 15 started on their slicks. And then that was quite a good race for a bit. Quartararo shot into the lead and the crowd went wild and the tricolour French flags were being waved. It was a huge crowd there. But then it started to rain again. And Quartararo was one of several down anyway in the rain, right in front of the main grandstand. So the crowd were all in tears and the French dream is over and it's not going to happen. And so then I think Marquez was out leading by then, Marc Marquez. So it looked like a normal race. But then it got wetter and wetter. And even Marquez, they all had to pit then. All of a sudden, those on slicks, they're back in the pits again to jump onto their wet weather tyres, having done their 2 long lap penalties and dropped back. But all of a sudden, when they all came out, the French crowd suddenly realised, hold on a minute. There's another Frenchman called Johan Zarco, who was one of the few that stayed on wets from the very beginning of this farce, was in the lead. It rippled around the crowds, because they're all crying because Fabio wasn't going to win. And then they all started waking up. We've got a Frenchman. A Frenchman hasn't won the French Grand Prix for 71 years.
Wow.
Since a Frenchman had won the French. So now they're all roaring away. But Marquez was only 8 seconds behind, having now got in and got the right tyres on. So I think most probably did, well, that would be a short-lived dream, and Marquez would catch him up and take away the win. But instead, Zarco started pulling away. And Marc Marquez said afterwards, because he fell off, he made a mistake in Spain, the previous Grand Prix, when he fell off trying too hard too soon. Yeah. And he realised that only his brother, the championship is at the moment between him and his brother. So apparently he started taking it steady, and Zarco just pulled further and further away. And in fact, Alex Marquez did fall as well in the conditions, so it was still incredibly tricky. But, now we had this Zarco leading and the crowd lumps in throats. Apparently the French commentator in the last lap broke down. He couldn't finish
amazing. I love it. I saw that.
We were all
lots of tears.
Yeah, that last lap, we're all just dreading him falling off. What he was thinking. I mean, it was just wonderful theatre.
Oh, I didn't know it was 71 years. That's amazing. That's fun. I love it.
Marseillaise was sung by the whole crowd and the tears went down. And
if ever you've been to a sporting event in France like Six Nations or something like that, rugby or football, they really do get behind it, which is great.
It was magical. Absolutely magical.
Because they've got no comms in their helmets in MotoGP.
No, they can't.
So it's all about pit boxes, or even worse for the pit crews. Of course, you've got to have a spotter to see. Yeah, but you got to, if they come in the pit unexpectedly, I guess you've got to have a spotter up there to say he's coming in the pit. He's coming in the pit. Because
when he started pulling away from Marquez, the crew were going mental on the pit board because he's increasing the lead. He's won one Grand Prix I think before, which I can't remember when. Zarco. He was a superstar of Moto 2, if it was still called that. I think he was the champion of Moto 2. So he's well into his 30s now. It was absolutely magical. Susie Perry was going through boxes of tissues back home. So Marc Marquez finished second, Aldegar another third, so another podium. And Pedro Costa, surprisingly, having thrown it down the road in almost every Grand Prix this season, managed to stay upright and finish fourth with his best result of the year, I think. So, magic. Moto 2, of course, were there as well. The Spanish Manuel Gonzalez had another win, strengthened his lead in the championship. He's pulling away at the front. Jake Dixon only managed fifth, but he's still third in the championship.
He was quite pleased with that result. I don't know why he was pleased with the fifth.
I mean, doesn't like the track. Who knows?
Yeah.
Moto 3 had a dramatic end. It was down to a bit of big pack racing for most of the race. There's 3 of them going into the final lap. This Aussie, Joel Kelso, has been very impressively coming up the rankings. And he led until the very last corner. And it's this horrible double sort of right hairpin bend, really slow. It's a horrible track, to be honest, in a car, but okay in bikes. But this other Spaniard, neither of them had won a Grand Prix. But Kelso left the door wide open. So the Spanish kid couldn't resist it, dived up the inside. They bumped into each other. Both went off the road. And the third place guy, Antonio Rueda, the Spanish bloke, just came inside, thank you very much, and won his 4th race of the year and increased his championship. So Two kids trying to get their first win were outdone by the wiser head, or maybe the lucky head. But it was a shame for Kelso. But he shouldn't have left the door up. The commentators were going mad at him. Just block him, block him, block him. But no, he thought he had enough lead to take the racing line, but he didn't. Scott Ogden, our British chap, had a good race. So he only qualified 17th, but he came up to 12th. And he was on the back of the 12 bike pack in the early days. So he had one of his better runs. He actually gained a place, I think, on the first lap, which he hasn't done in his Moto 3 career, I don't think, which has always been his weakness, first lap. So that was wonderful entertainment in France, in the rain. And then we also had wonderful entertainment in Belgium at Spa with no rain.
Rain. That circuit that we've only got to have every other year, and there's no guarantee how long in the future it's going to be. Yet we've got Miami until 2041. That rubbish circuit.
Big hypercars on a proper track.
Yeah.
Because Imola, we talked about Imola, which is coming up for Formula One this weekend, because it's got too many chicanes. They can't overtake, and they just go around looking for, pit lane gaining. But, it was another Ferrari 1-2, so on paper it looked a bit dull. But now, all of a sudden, we had Alpines, Peugeots, Cadillacs, Porsches, BMWs, all up the front challenging. And it became a great race because Alpine led for quite a long time before the strategy just didn't quote. The top three finished.
Maybe Alpine are go getting ready for that balance of power as well. Maybe they're going to.
But they've done the opposite. They shot themselves in the foot because guess which formerly dominant manufacturer qualified
would be from Japan, 15th, would they?
Would it be qualified 15th? Oh, you must be slow. Poor Toyotas. Oh dear, you only qualified 15th. They managed to creep up to finish 4th behind the 2 Ferraris and 1 Alpine. But yes, one wonders what's going on before Le Mans. But of course,
I would sandbag because no one remembers Spa. I mean, with the greatest respect, it was an epic race, and it was brilliant.
Overtaking into Eau Rouge side by once they were 3 wide going up the Kemmel Straight. They were properly at it because they had a length of straight where they could do it.
What did you race around Spa? What have you raced around Spa?
The Porsche 962, Group C car Porsche 962. So and all sorts. That Jaguar One Make series, which I crashed Eau Rouge. I don't make that XJR 13.
How fast are you taking Eau Rouge? What are you doing? Little dab at the top?
Oh no, gosh, we were changing down in those days, down from 5th to 4th.
Wow,
big heavy Group C Porsche. Yeah, it was a bit of a braking zone. You didn't go flat into Eau Rouge.
I knew it wouldn't have been flat, but I thought maybe just a dab at the top, a bit like paddock, and then
I won there. I won my last race there. The Lister Storm. Back in '96, I think it was, the British GT Championship round went to Spa. And I was on that.
Get Newcastle United on it. What was all that about? Who put that deal together?
That was the original money that, what are the family names?
Jack Walker. Jack Walker, was it?
No, not Jack Walker. Sir, who rebuilt Newcastle's football ground? But his son had bought Supercars.
I'm sorry, that's Newcastle fans. I love Newcastle. That's bloody... Walker family is Blackburn, isn't it?
Yes. So you've got the wrong football club now. Just to add insult to injury. Oh, God. Anyway, the family's boy, he was a big supercar buyer. He bought Ferraris and everything else. And he bought a Lister. So he met Lawrence Pierce from Lister, who said, how about helping sponsor a Le Mans car, which he did. So, and with other finance. So that's why we had Newcastle on the car. Yes, I won, but it wasn't a Newcastle car, it was in a plain car winning at Spa.
Freddie Shepherd.
No, he was the managing director. No, Freddie Shepherd was the other director.
He was the chairman. He was
the family. He was Sir John Hall. Sir John Hall.
Oh yeah, Sir John Hall.
Oh, for goodness sake!
And then he must have sold it to Mike Ashley, Sports Direct.
Yes, I presume so. Yeah.
Anyway, we digress.
He left me. I'm still going around Spa now, watching the race. So it was great racing, 6 hours. GT race was won by Ferrari from the Ford Mustang, another Ferrari. The worst thing coming out of press conference at Spa that the promoter says we're not going to have any more races. 8 is enough. We're going to look for stability. Oh. Well, Silverstone desperately wants around.
Yeah,
we're still going to go back to Imola where they can't overtake. We're going to go out to Qatar because they pay a lot of money for it. It looks really dull in the desert. Ah, dear. There are times. Surely, once you've got a successful formula, you need to grow it, not stabilise it. When you've got, I don't know how many manufacturers are in it now. We're up to about 8 or 9 or 10.
which is amazing.
Yeah, amazing. So for goodness sake, don't hold it back. Let it go.
And the GTs and everything that goes with it as well.
They don't go to Sebring anymore. The Sebring 12-hour race, which used to be the championship opener, we go to Qatar instead. A fabulous historic track with a huge crowd.
It's all about the money, son, isn't it?
Well, where else I was going to talk about crowds. Where was I going to talk about crowds? We're moving on now, in fact, to Indy, where we're on the road course for Indy, and there's no crowd there. And the track just doesn't excite me to watch. And I always think, funny enough, that's led from crowds to crowds. No, go away. I don't want to say hello. No, I'm on my own. Bye-bye. So they're going around the Indianapolis magnificent estate the wrong way for what was built as the Grand Prix track. And it's just a rubbish track. Well, when they're going the wrong way around these huge grandstands, which in 4 weeks' time will be full of 250,000 fans, it just gives the wrong impression. And it sort of takes the wind when you're watching. It's like watching tennis last night in Rome.
Madrid. Oh, Rome.
And when you get these early rounds, there's nobody in the grandstands. About 6 spectators.
It's weird, isn't it? Why there's no one there?
Yeah, but you're feeling it watching the television. So it actually reduces. It takes away your TV enjoyment. Like, coming from Le Mans with 200,000 Frenchmen, 100,000, whatever it was on the day. In the grandstand. So you feel the crowd, even though you're watching on television. And that spoils your TV enjoyment if there's no crowd there. And it's huge now. I mean, there were a lot down at turn 1 for the road courses. They turn off the Indianapolis, but there were a few people spattered around. There can't be more than 5,000 spectators, I wouldn't have thought, going to watch a major single-seater round, which the same grid attracts 300,000 in 3 weeks' time for the Indy 500. So it's a shame. You've got to get big. You shouldn't be allowed to have a championship race unless you can get a crowd in. Put the pressure on the circuits, because there's no crowd at Kuwait for the sports cars. So where was I? Sorry, I'm ranting off about crowd. You need a crowd. Indy road course. It's always been a technical, strategic tyre wear race anyway. We mentioned last week that they tried to jazz it up by insisting you had to use 2 of the primary sets, the slower tyres, and 2 of the alternative tyres, the red sidewall quicker tyres, which meant you had to do 3 stops, which took away. Some people used to win it by doing 2 stops and saving fuel a lot, so gaining position. But it didn't really mix things up a bit. There was a really good, it was a great story with a negative, because Louis Foster, our champion of the Indy NXT last week, British driver, rookie at Indycar, qualified 3rd on the grid in his first season. So it's fantastic. But I don't want to take anything away from Louis by saying this, but he was in this Rahal Lanigan Team Rahal. And they had 3 cars in the top 6. Now, this is the same team which, when they do the Indy 500, used to have, but a couple of years ago, with the 3 cars at the back of the grid. So how important your car is in these single make championships is something that worries me a lot and depresses me a lot. So, as I said, I don't want to take anything away from him qualifying 3rd.
There's single makes, the Dallara chassis, and they've either got a Ford or a Chevy engine.
But each team, and Rahal have always been quick on this Indy road course. Now, you've got to believe, someone would have taken a job and left Rahal and gone to work at somewhere else and could tell them the secret of how to go around the Indy road course quickly. It's bizarre. I can't get to understand why a team can have a trick of suspension setups that can give such an advantage at one course and that can be completely rubbish at another. It's bizarre. However, nothing stopped Alex Palou, who is just killing them over there. He was on pole in his Ganassi car. The other Ganassi cars were, 5th and 6th and 7th on the grid, so not as quick. And he just cruised to his 4th win. Graham Rahal, who qualified 2nd ahead of Foster, did lead for a while, so we had a bit of a glory, but then just strategy, tyre wear, keeping the tyres going for longer. Palou, he's just sensational. And we just got to buy him out. We've got to put him in a Cadillac or something for next year.
They're saying that he's better than Max Verstappen.
Oh,
he's the best driver in the world.
He's so smooth.
He's epic because he's pulling away and no one can get close to him.
No.
Even your mate.
4 wins out of 5. And he was 2nd at Long Beach, where a Long Beach special. Who won it? He won it again. Someone that's always good at Long Beach and nowhere else. So yeah, another great win. And the Rahal boys, they ended up. Graham Rahal was sixth. Louis was 11th, which is still a great result for a rookie. He finished 11th. Right on the pack, they're all close. The other Rahal car ended up. Devlin Di Francesco ended up down in 17th. And it was a colourful train with some overtaking, bits of drama. A colourful train going around a huge empty stadium. It just can't get excited by it. It affects a lot. Anyway, so that was IndyCar, not a brilliantly entertaining race. Another domination by Palou. IMSA Sportscars were down at Laguna Seca, fantastic track to watch. I didn't see it because it was very late last night. So I've read the stories this morning, but it was another Porsche Penske 1-2. I think they've won all the IMSA races, which they need a bit of balance of power over there somehow. But for the first time, it wasn't Nick Tandy's team that won it. Nick Tandy was in the second finishing Penske Porsche. Actually, a bit of drama in the very last. It was very close. I mean, BMW on pole. They've been pushed. They're not always the quickest, these Penske Porsches, but the Penske team, renowned for brilliant strategy and brilliant, pit stops and pit crew. But the leaders got held up on the last couple of laps by a little bunch of GT cars. And Tandy got blocked coming into the last hairpin, and the BMW had a dive down the outside, and Tandy shoulder barged him off and scraped through to still keep the second place for the second of the Porsches. And the BMW recovered to finish third.
I saw that. There's a lot of argy-bargy, wasn't there? Well, there's been quite a bit of argy-bargy in sports cars recently, towards the end.
Well, GT3s I hate to watch. I mean, you look at DTM. I mean, the driving standards in these GT3. Well, didn't we touch on this last week? Because they got traction control, they got ABS.
Yeah.
And they don't get injured. They don't hurt themselves much when they crash because the cars are so well built nowadays. And the driving standards are appalling in some of this GT. There was a Porsche support race at Spa last weekend with the World Endurance Championship. I think they came out 4 wide into Blanchimont, which when I went round there was a really gnarly curb, and if I bounced the curb, the bloody barrier was half a car away from me. So you didn't dive in 5 wide to Blanchimont in those days.
Because there's so many runoffs,
Yeah, so they just go for it nowadays because they've got the runoffs. But then that's for safety reasons. Yeah. So, GT, that was a Porsche, won the GT class as well, from a Ferrari, and a Chevrolet Corvette was third. One of the crew was Alexander Sims, who's one of the great British drivers who's been working his world around the world. So, possibly a really entertaining race at Laguna Seca. We didn't watch it. It was close. Well, NASCAR. I know I promote NASCAR. I know I said, NASCAR had one of the most boring races for the year. The only good thing about it was completely dominated by Kyle Larson. He won stage 1. Stage 1 and stage 2, it was pedestrian. Nobody overtook anybody. Nobody crashed. Stage 3, now they're all heating up a bit. But they had about 4 restart crashes because this track, I mean, it's a really good track. I mean, it's exciting. But they were trying to go 5 wide and 4 wide. And then we had 3 on the trot where they had a restart, crash, restart, crash, restart, crash. But finally, they had a run of green flag racing, and Kyle just pulled out a 3 or 4 second lead and won it. But they are talking about, at least in NASCAR, they admit that the racing's boring. This new generation of car hasn't produced the excitement that the old generations had. They are thinking of how to address the problem. They're talking about upping power. Power's 670 horsepower. They're talking about going to 750 to see if that can make a change. But, they've created a more scientific, a more aero-dependent car to move with the times. And, of course, Larson lost the lead on one of the restarts, and he was struggling. He dropped back to 4th, because now he's in dirty air, and you've got to work around dirty air. Whereas the guys out front in clean air now, NASCAR, is so important. And that's not a good idea for racing.
It's such a shame, isn't it? Because we don't want that in racing. We want people to be able to follow for 5 laps, 5 inches behind.
Make a move.
Exactly.
Which they do in the Supercars. Supercars down under, they can race as close as your bumper can be. They were on the old school Simmons Plain track in Tasmania. There were 2 wins for Brock Feeney in his Red Bull Chevy Camaro. But the third race, he was held off in really close. He was held off by 0.055 seconds by the Mustang of Max Payne. But I think it stopped earlier to get ahead, so did a bit of pit stop strategy, had rather more worn out tyres. So close racing down there. And Brock Feeney now, by winning 2 and finishing second, he closes in on the championship leader Cam Waters in the Ford. It's my Castrol Mustang, who had a 4th, a 3rd, and a 12th. But entertaining supercars, although I didn't see it on telly, and I'm just guessing by the results.
What about back home?
Back home,
BMW
BTCC.
BTCC Brands, all the Bs.
BMW bounce back at Brands. So you missed a B out there. BMW's bounce. They were useless at Donington, but they were the car to have at Brands Hatch.
Clean sweep, 3 out of 3.
Yeah, but with 3 different drivers, which was even more fascinating.
Yeah,
3 different drivers. I mean, again, with tyres and strategy, the qualifying system, and the boost is taking a lot of effect now in qualifying, which is what they wanted to do, because Ash Sutton was qualified 13th because he only had 1 second of boost in his qualifying laps, while others had 2 seconds and 3 seconds and 5 seconds. And of course, Jake Hill, who had a bad Donington, benefited from the extra boost to go on pole. Then they have to choose between soft and hard tyres, and as usual, the top 10.
Just explain on the boost, though. At a circuit like Brands Hatch, you need to qualify as close as you can to the front, because it's hard to overtake on the Indy circuit.
Huge. But then they've got the tyre differentiation. So, but always the first 8 or 9 go on the soft tyre for the race 1, where they've qualified in order. So race 1 is always a bit boring because they tend to run in grid order, and as you say, overtaking is hard. Whereas the guys from sort of 10 back get rid of the hard tyre in race 1 and don't really get anywhere. Like Ash Sutton did that, and he finished, he qualified 13th and got up to 10th, I think, on the harder tyre. But Jake romped away with race 1 from pole position, chased by Charles Rainford, this guy that's moved into his teammate, who was he raced Porsches the last 2 or 3 years. I think he didn't win the championship, but he was runner-up, I'm not sure. And he looked really impressive. He was staying with Jake, enjoying it, everybody else. So that was race 1, was quite normal. But then on race 2, where they all started up front, so now Hill and Rainford had to go on the hard tyre, and they were swamped by everybody else. Now it was now the soft tyres. Yes, it gets too confused. The commentators don't say often enough. Sorry, Tim. Don't want Cooper, Tim, because I've tried to tell him to put a big red disc, Tim, on the windscreen, so all the time when we watch them go around a corner, we can see who's on the softer tyre. But through the carnage of being on the hard tyre, this 19-year-old Daryl De Leon, who's done a season and a half, I think, in an old Cupra Leon down the back of the pack. He came from karting, did a few radicals. So again, not a great stellar, way to the top. But he was the only BMW with a soft tyre now. And he came through and won it quite easily. And amazing. So he was absolutely over the moon, taking the advantage of being on the softer tyre for race 2. Then the reverse grid race was this fantastic drive by Rainford. Because the draw put Rowbottom on pole position, Hill was second because they finished 7th, 8th and 9th or something, being on the harder tyre in race 2. But it was Rainford that went past Hill, went past Rowbottom, took the lead. Hill got past Rowbottom and chased after Rainford and put pressure on him, but he didn't crack under pressure and came through for an amazing win. So, 3 different, very, very happy BMW family at the end of the day. And 3 different winners. But again,
Ash Sutton's still leading the championship, isn't it?
Yeah.
The 3 of them, Tom, Ash and Jake are miles in front. But he had a pretty average weekend for his... The last race was okay.
He recovered a 3rd and a 4th. So he got to 3rd. Yeah. When he moved onto the soft tyre, he came from 10th on the grid to 3rd in race 2. But then, of course, by getting that high in race 2, it put him lower down for the reverse grid race 3. It's all bit swings and roundabouts and snakes and ladders, isn't it? When do you use the hard tyre, the soft tyre? How much boost you got? When can you use your boost? As I said, it's all a bit, it's all a bit contrived to make 3 different winners, but we don't. It doesn't like that word.
Contrived's probably the wrong word, isn't it? It's just
because
it's there to make it entertaining.
Oh yeah, I know. But that's why it's control. That is the word. Yeah, to make it entertaining. Yeah. But it's like balance and power and stuff. But you want it to be motor racing. Ideally, you want it to be meritorious to the best.
Yeah, I agree. But look at those 3: Ash Sutton, Tom Ingram, and Jake Hill. They're 30 points
always
clear
there,
of anyone else, and they're always there. So hopefully it will work out.
They know how to play the game. There'll be little starlets having their moment on the top podium. Not the Daryl DeLeon, you may well be not on the Starlets, but they were all, he got the fastest lap in the last race, Daryl, so he got the lap record.
I was pleased to see Nick Hamilton did quite well at Brands. He likes Brands, I think, but he did quite well at Brands.
Meanwhile,
right,
a very meritorious support race produced perhaps the best racing of the whole weekend. The Caterhams were awesome. The races I saw 2 races on the Sunday. I don't know what on the Saturday had a race. And which Caterham? This is the same Caterham lot that run your academy's dream, is it? Yeah. There's some breakaway Caterham races as well.
It's all the official Caterham stuff.
Yeah. And then, it's slipstream. It's slipstreaming.
And nice to see people like us. We've always supported it, but Martin Brundle tweeted about it as well, said how good the Caterhams were. And it just goes to show, we've always said it. It doesn't have to be the fastest race car in the world to be exciting racing.
Yeah.
But and I really encourage anyone to go and watch Caterham race or any racing, any your Formula Ford stuff, which you've got to get back out and race this year. Formula Ford, you've got to. Tiff,
it's cozy in its garage.
Let's do a GoFundMe to get you out there. And he's worried. Last time we took it out. That must be 3 years ago at Karlsruhe. Someone took your front end off. It cost you a couple of grand.
And one race after that, I went to Brands Hatch, but I felt very tentative going into turn 1. Well, I enjoyed. It's wonderful to drive. But then we need more. You need Caterhams. Make them have a BTCC support race, Formula Ford Classics. Because they need that sort of thing. Because you got the minis, and the minis are very bash crash minis, and Porsches tend to be a bit spread out, but they're good racing as well. But Caterhams and Formula Fords, they're using them again this year. What are the little tiny silly things with motorbike engines, which are greatly entertaining? They have them as a support race. Them buzzing. Oh God, my brain's going. I'm worried about my brain. Legends, the legends.
Okay.
They're often a support package at BTCC.
Good stuff. What's coming up next week?
Lots of ups and downs in the world of motorsport. Well, we're Imola, of course, Formula One for the no overtaking Grand Prix at Imola, because they got too many chicanes. For Formula One, no overtaking race. A Formula 2, no overtaking race. And probably Formula 3, no overtaking races.
I bet there will be overtaking in Formula 3 and Formula 2.
They don't tend to get processional because they haven't got DRS, and not that DRS is any use. I mean, the worst thing about Imola is the one place, the DRS, the one straight, has got this awful kink just before the braking area. Some of them, what's his name, circuits, he actually seems to put kinks in. Tilke circuit. He seems to want to kink just in the braking area. You've got to keep long and straight.
Is he a racing driver? Is he an ex-racing driver?
Yeah, he raced at Nurburgring, apparently. Grew up there. What was that big crash between George and his Williams and someone else? Was it, who would have been in the Mercedes factory driver then? Bottas,
yeah.
Because that happened, because Bottas, they were in the straight line side by side, and Bottas just edged and George has pushed in because the kink has pushed him left. So
that's big,
If you just stick on the left down that straight, they're not going to get by you with DRS unless they put the DRS earlier. So maybe this year they've moved the DRS. Who knows?
No, they haven't. I bet they haven't done anything at all.
No. They do tinker with the DRS positions.
We didn't mention in the news as well that Carlos Sainz Senior. This will be
vote. Get him in. Taking on the FIA president place, which I think we all think would be a good change.
Epic. What a good guy to have at the helm. What else is coming out next week?
World Rally Boys are in Portugal, where we hope Alpine can continue to lead the championship, although Rovan Perez beginning to show a bit of form at the last rally. Formula E's are in Tokyo. It's the first time in Japan, I think. I think this is a new circuit. I haven't looked at the track or what. Probably in a park somewhere, up and down a park. So it's not on a racing circuit. It's in Tokyo. World Superbikes at the Czech track at Most, where it'll probably be a pretty processional race, sadly, as the two Ducatis and the BMW seem to be just ahead of everybody else. British Superbikes are going to be a very sad regathering at Donington. Obviously, it's going to be a very open wound so recently. So let's hope they have a good, clean racing and lots of entertainment and a big crowd there to support them. And I
think the big crowds are given. I really do think everyone will go and support.
Yeah. Keeping in touch with GB3, which we think is an interesting formula this week, because Abby Pulling's in it. They go to Zandvoort to see how they all race, because the GB3, they're taking them to more European circuits now to introduce Grand Prix circuits to the drivers. So,
but Zandvoort's been dropped, so what a waste of time that is.
Well, not yet, though. Oh, yes. When's it drop? How soon?
Put it this way, by the time they get there, it's not going to be in.
But will Freddie Slater dominate again? Will Abby Pulling get on a podium? All this and more. Did you ever watch that famous comedy program? No. Soap. Was it
Probably
called
not.
Soap? It was a spoof soap and everything. All this and more next week. Will he do this? Will he do that?
We'll leave him to talk on his own, and I'll cut him off now. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining. Bye.